Hi, I'd like to talk a little bit about microservices architecture. Now, in the lifetime of most applications, any that are, say, dynamic or servicing a growing business, the application itself will tend to get larger and a bit more complex, and eventually the problems of maintaining it and managing it become quite severe. So one response to this in a number of the larger and very visible companies is to shift to what's now become known as a microservices architecture. This is an architectural style in which complex applications are decomposed into smaller independent components that can be run on separate servers. Now the term microservices wasn't used until 2011, but in 2005 micro web services as a term was used by Dr. Peter Rogers in a conference in 2005. Now this he used to describe the functionality provided by a collection of independent services. Now in 2011 there was a workshop in which a number of software architects were discussing what they were doing, and what emerged was this whole concept that became named and labeled as microservices architecture. It has been described by some people as fine-grained SOA, that's service-oriented architecture, and other people have dismissed it as, yeah, well, that was what SOA was supposed to be all along. If you believe that school, well, we can go back to structured programming and say, well, that's what structured programming was intended to do. And that's true. All of these things do have very similar objectives. It just the manner of achieving those objectives changes a bit. In any application that's growing, as I said before, it usually will grow both in size and in complexity. As you introduce more functionality, you tend to get more interconnections between different parts of the system, and eventually this becomes something of just a rat's nest of relationships, and very, very unmaintainable and unmanageable. Now the situation could be improved. I mean, this has been one of the aims of architecture and structuring right from the beginning. You take any spaghetti code program and you look at it and say, well, if we structured this better, it would be easier to understand, easier to maintain. And it would be. Now this is no different. You take something that's become intertwined and you say, look, we're going to have to separate this into separate comprehensible parts. Now whether you do that within the monolithic application or whether you split the application into separate executable components, in many ways is pretty arbitrary. Now, in this particular case, we're looking at microservices architecture in which we'll take the view that we split these things into separately executable components because that enforces the discipline of complete separation. So that's the origins and the motivations for microservices architecture.